Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are now coming on to the home stretch. And what I'm going to be doing over the remaining videos is to look at the transactions on Appendix 6. Now note that the financial year on this is 2020, but effectively I want it to be 2021. So just be mindful of that this is supposed to be 2021. Okay? All right, so I won't bother to change this. Coming. Now, these transactions on Appendix 6, I can put them into different categories. First of all, some of these transactions are customer related. Some of these transactions are vendor related. Now you need to be able to identify these upfront because classifying them is going to guide you as to which tab on Sage you need to select in order to record your transaction. So just look at a few of them. The first transaction is for 2nd of January 2021. It is coming from the RGR Communications Group, and the service is for advertising expenses, and the amount is for $56,744. Now, if you are paying for advertising expenses, it means that this is a vendor-related transaction. Okay? Let's look at the second one. Received amount outstanding from BML, check number 4125, re-invoice 1123. So if you are receiving money from BML, it would indicate that BML is a customer who did business with you before, a credit sale before, and now they are paying up. So this is a customer-related transaction. So the first transaction, we would click on the vendor and payments tab. And for the second transaction, we would click on the customer and services tab. And that would be the start of understanding where to go to do what. So as you go through each of the different transactions, you need to be aware of which tab you will find the windows you will need to capture this information. So let me jump into Sage. And I want to draw your attention to the icons that you'll be using. Now for this particular video, I'm going to start my focus on the customers. Now in the middle panel are the icons which indicate the windows that you could possibly use in order to record your transactions. Now remember I mentioned earlier that these arrows indicate the direction in which your sales process will run. So a client will call and ask for a quotation. So you click on this to create the quotation. You send it to them. The customer, on receiving the quotation, will send you a purchase order. And so that purchase order, when you receive it, causes you to generate a sales order internally. Now, if you remember your revenue cycle from your lectures in AIS, you will note that eventually the goods will be selected from the warehouse and sent to shipping so that the goods can be sent off to the customer. But most importantly, the billing department will be generating the sales invoice to be sent to the customer. This sales invoice will confirm what they're buying and what they're going to be paying for them. And eventually, money is received from the customer. So I want to go back to Appendix 6. And I'm going to highlight the transactions that are generic as it relates to a typical credit sale. A typical credit sale. So the first thing I'm going to do is to highlight this transaction. So this step here says received purchase order from BML. This is going to be the starting transaction for your customer related business, where the customer sends in a purchase order to you to indicate what it is they want to buy. Now then, once you have received the order, you're going to have to generate a sales order as a result. So every time you get a purchase order, the next step for you is to generate a sales order. Now, generating the sales order allows you to pull the information from your inventory listing and ultimately generate an invoice. And this invoice you're going to send to your customer. So now note this transaction. So on the 4th, you got the purchase order from BML. And 4 days later, you sent the goods to BML along with an internally generated document, the invoice. And the invoice reference is 1001. So this marks the second stage or the second step in your transactions. Now, once the goods have been received by the customer and they have not sent it back to you for whatever reason, you are now expecting them to pay that bill. So you sent out the invoice on the 8th of January. And then on the 21st of January, almost 2 weeks later, you get an invoice. Okay? And this will complete the step as far as the customer is concerned. So quickly review. The customer sends in the purchase order, and it triggers a sales order from your side. Then that sales order is converted to an invoice and sent to the customer along with the goods. And then at some agreed time or appropriate time, you receive a check from the customer. So this marks the 3 basic steps in the project for credit sales from customers for customers. Now, this type of transaction accounts for almost 98% of the customer-related transactions. And so once you get a handle on this video, you should have no trouble going through and picking up those customer transactions and using the appropriate windows, capture the details surrounding that transaction. So that being said, now let us go to Sage and put in this information. So now we're back on Sage, and because we're doing customer related transactions, then we have to click on the customer and sales tab in order to get access to the relevant windows. Now to recall, on the 4th of January, you get a purchase order. It means that you're going to have to click on this icon to create a sales order. Let's maximize the window. So on this window, you're capturing information regarding what the customer ordered. Now, depending on the quantities, this sales order may convert to one or more invoices. Let us say, for example, in this case, the customer wants 21 PROC, which are processors. They might, or you might know that they won't need all of them at one time. And so you could break this order into 3 invoices. So the beauty of the sales order is that it allows you the flexibility to break up your customer's order to suit their specific requirement. It may be a case that their storeroom can't hold everything that they want, but you have an arrangement to send over X amount of your goods over a period of time. So this sales order will cover 2 or more invoices that will be sent as each batch of goods are sent. Now let us look at the screen. The first thing you want to do is to look for your customer. So you click on your look up button and pick up BML. Now I didn't change the credit limit on that. I'll do that in a minute. So by selecting your customer ID, Sage autofills the billing address and it autofills the shipping address. So we're going to change the date to the 4th of January. Now the ship by date, the customer would have indicated on their purchase order the latest date by which these goods need to reach them. And so this ship by date is very important, because if you cannot fill their order by that date, it makes no sense for the customer. Now for the project, I'm going to ask that you use the end of the month, the last day of the month for all transactions as the ship by date. Now, it is customary for every single document generated in a business to have its unique reference number. So I am going to call this S01, sales order number 1. Now, this box, the closed sales order, and this box, the drop ship, we will not be using in the project. But closed sales order here is just saying that once this is generated and it has been used up, we can shut it down in the event where we're using it to fill a number of invoices. So you can Google what this is about. Drop ship, you'll hear a lot about on the internet, where these goods that are being ordered can bypass the seller and go straight to the warehouse. You can Google drop ship. On the internet, drop shipping is one way of generating income, where you create a storefront on the internet and you can connect suppliers to your customers. But rather than the goods coming to you, you can ask them to deliver the goods directly to the customer. So this drop ship feature is going to time with the vendor that you get these goods that you're going to put on, that you get these goods from. But we're not really going to be using it, but you can inquire on it on the internet or query it if you so desire. Now, the only thing that we are going to be putting in for the project on this sales order is your customer, and the bill and shipping address will autofill. The date, the ship by date, which is the end of the month for all of your sales orders, that will be the ship by date, and a unique reference number. So this is our first sales order. I have given it S01 as a reference. and basically the next order will be SO2, then SO3. So what we're using here are sequential codes. All documents in accounting use sequential codes, and that way if a document is out of place, it is easily picked up. So the only other information that we have here is to put in the amount of items that were ordered. We're going to look here to see if we can pick up one proc, because that is what the person is buying. So notice that by selecting the item from our inventory listing, the description autofills, the unit price autofills, and the amount is calculated. All right. So apparently I need to shift my window bit. All right. So notice now that at the bottom, the GCT automatically calculates. So if you have set up your GCT correctly, once you have picked up the selling price, here in this case it's 53,620, then the system will automatically generate the sales tax and give you a sales order total. Now this is the basic information that I have given for all similar type customer transactions. All right. So putting in your quantity, putting in the item type, in this case one proc, the system autofills the description, automatically puts in a unit price, automatically calculates an amount, and automatically calculates GCT. And so you have a final figure of $61,663. Okay. Now down here, if you remember, we got a message that the credit limit is over. So what I'm going to do here is use the opportunity. Once I save this, let me save the transaction and close, is to go back to the main menu to change the credit limit to $250,000 for everybody. If you remember in your project instructions, that was the starting credit limit. So I'm going to go to options, default information, customers, and I'm going to terms and credits. So what I'm doing here, once I make this change, it is going to apply to every single customer. Now, after this, you do have the opportunity to change the credit limit to suit that specific customer. But right now, everybody is getting 250, 1, 2, 3. So notice that Notify Over Limit option has been selected, which means that if the things that are being sold exceeds 250,000, a message will pop up saying that this is over the limit, and so you as the owner manager have the option to override the credit limit restriction for that particular customer. But this $250,000, because it's a global option, will affect every customer. All right, so we have done the sales order. Now, on the 8th, 4 days later, the goods are sent out by you to the customer. And so by clicking on this icon, we can go to a new sales invoice. Let's maximize the window. I'm going to put in the customer ID. Okay. Again, the system autofills the billing address, the shipping address. Let's change the invoice date, which is the 8th. Now, this due date we can preset globally as well to show a set period within which credit is given. Now, this looks like 30 days credit because we are doing the invoice on the 8th, and the system automatically calculates the due date to be the 7th of the following month. So this would suggest that the credit limit, the payment period, has been given. The payment period given is 30 days. Sorry about that. All right, so the due date automatically calculates based on the invoice date. I'm going to show you where on the global option we can set the credit days. All right. Companies don't normally give 30 days anymore. The most that they'll probably give is like a week, if that much. All right. Now let us put in our invoice number, which is 1001. Again, this is going to be our first invoice. So all subsequent invoices will follow that sequence, 1002, 1003, etc., etc. So here we have the net 30 days, which is the terms. I'm going to click on it. And so you have the option to change that information specific to the customer. But we're going to stick with the 30 days. Now then, you cannot do a sales invoice, which is where we are now. You cannot do a sales invoice unless you can link it to a specific sales order. So here I am looking for the sales order. It says apply to sales order number, and it is SO1. When we do that, the system autofills the bottom part of the invoice to show what was on the order. And here we have 20 items. Now we're assuming that all 20 are shipped. So we have to enter the quantity that was shipped. Now this is the beauty of the sales order, because we could easily have put this as 10 and break up the order into more than one invoice. So here one invoice, this one in particular, only has 10 items. Now for the project, we are assuming that whatever sales order that was generated, the full amount is what is going to be shipped. So I'm changing this back to 20. So unless you have a pre-prepared sales invoice, then you cannot generate a sales invoice under a credit sales arrangement. All right, so I'm going to save and close. So just to show you that you can go to options, go back to your default information, go back to your customers, and change the net due date from 30. You can change it to 7 days. And what is going to happen is that it's going to affect your collection schedule, your aging schedule. What do I mean by an aging schedule? A schedule that shows you the dates or periods when your customers' monies are due. All right. All right, so on to our last leg. So we did the sales order first, then we went to the sales invoice, and now we're going to receive money. Now this is the first money received since I've started the project, and so Sage needs to know which bank account we are using, because on record we really have two. Now the JMMB fixed deposit account is a bank account, but that is not our operating bank account, and so we have to specify to Sage that this BNS checking account is the one that we're going to be using. All right, so now we're on our screen to capture the money, and you'll notice at the top left of the window, we're in the receive money window. Now the first field to the left is called the deposit ticket ID. Now what is this about? If you have already done auditing, you would have understood that when cash comes into the office or checks, it is best to be lodged immediately and not kept there, because it might entice someone to use it and put it back, or use it and don't put it back. And so this deposit ticket ID allows you to immediately recognize in your bank account that this amount is going to be lodged. Now, if you don't put anything in the deposit ticket ID, then it will not reflect in the bank account immediately. You can go to the help option and research how this works. Okay, so do some reading on it. But just to kind of keep the video tight, because we're at 25 minutes already, I'm going to put in the ID. Now, the ID is a reflection of the date that the money is lodged. And this money came in on the 21st of January. So here's how I'm going to construct the deposit ticket ID. I'm going to put in the year, the month, and the date the funds came in. So that is my deposit ticket ID. So at any point, whatever ticket ID I see, it will tell me the date the lodgements should have gone in. All right, so whose money are we looking at? We're looking at BML. Now notice to the left of the bottom part of the screen, we have in blue two numbers. These are the numbers for the outstanding invoice, the invoices that BML has for you. So that payment that is going to now be made on the 21st of January, the third of the highlighted transactions that I showed you on Appendix 6, this money came in specifically for invoice 1001. Now the check/reference number is the customer's check, and we're told in the project it was check number 4135. We have to give it a receipt, so I'm going to give it 001, which means that all subsequent receipts will follow the same sequence, 002, 003, etc. The money came in on the 21st of January, and the amount is for the full total. So it's a payment by check, and down here you have other options, cash, etc. But it's a check payment because we just put in a check reference. And I am going to click this box under the column pay. So notice what happens. It automatically puts in the full value on the invoice. This is the amount due, $61,663. And by clicking on this box, it assumes a full payment. But notice also, it feeds that same figure in the receipts amount. Now let us say, for example, that BML was not paying the full amount, but only paying $35,000. You do have the option to put in the amount that is actually paid, which may be a part payment. But for the sake of the project, we're assuming full payment. So I am going to click this button here. Okay. And right now, when I click that button, what is it showing me? It is showing me how much money I have in the bank account before this money is received. Now, I did not put in my opening journal entry, and so the BNS checking account right now is showing 0. But yours should be showing the 2 million, whatever, that was in your opening journal entry. All right, so just to quickly recap, we're posting the transaction for the 21st, which is when the customer paid in the bill for invoice 1001. We put in a deposit ticket ID, which is similar to the date in terms of how it's coded. We selected the customer, and as we selected the customer, Sage brought up over here all the outstanding invoices that the customer has for you. Now, by clicking over in this pay box, in the respective line or the pertinent line, then it will autofill the full amount on the invoice, but you do have the option to record part payments if that is how the customer paid. Over here, we're putting the customer's check number, which was 4135. We put in our internal sequential code for receipts, which is 001. We entered the date the money was received, and this autofilled once we clicked this box here. The payment method we have is by check. Now I clicked this $sign over here just to check what the balance was in the bank before this lodgement, or this money is received and lodged. All right, so that marks the third of the 3 steps that the customer process will use, and this accounts for approximately 98% of all the customer transactions. So once you understand this process, you can now go through and record your customer related transactions. So the next video that I'm going to be doing is looking at the vendors. Now for the vendors, we have 2 options. We can use cash upfront to pay for the goods or services as you get it, or you can go into a credit purchase arrangement. So we're going to look now on that second video that follows this, how that is done. But right now, that marks the end of our customer related transactions. May I suggest before I close that you look at returns, sales returns, because that option is there. It is going to happen, but I am not going to show you how to do it. There's a help feature here that you need to familiarize yourself with. This one, and it's like a built-in instructor's manual. It will show you how to do the different processes. So look at it in relation to what I have told you, what it is suggesting, and the transactions involving credit returns or sales returns. I am not going to show you how. Please go to help and find out how it is done, because I think you do have 1 or 2 customers who returned goods to you, and you're going to need to know how to do it. Okay? All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.